Now we made good progress. Before we explore this change password feature and all of that, there is a little optimization which you could consider implementing, especially if you had a bigger application. At the moment, we're using this session functionality in a couple of different components. To be precise, we use session in the main navigation component. Now, one problem we have with that is that if we are authenticated and I reload whilst on this profile page, then we figure out whether the user is authenticated or not in that get server-side props function of that page. Here, this function runs. And then after the page was loaded, this use session hook, which we use in main navigation, will technically also again run some logic to find out whether we have a session or not. And we see this here in the network tab. If I reload, you see there is a request being sent to /API/auth/session. That request is actually sent by that use session hook. And it's sent to check whether that session cookie which it found is valid, because we can't validate that with client-side JavaScript for security reasons. Hence, that cookie needs to be sent to an endpoint, which then determines whether it is valid or not. So that's why this request is being sent. There is nothing wrong with this request, but since we already checked our session here in get server-side props when we loaded /profile, we already know that we are authenticated. So this is actually a redundant request which is being sent here. And we can avoid it by using an extra component offered by NextAuth. In our _app.js file, so in this file which wraps all our page components which are being rendered, we can import the special provider component from NextAuth/client. This is a wrapper which we can wrap around all our other components, so around the layout and the nested component. And then provider wants a session prop. And here we simply set any session data which we might already have. Now the interesting thing is that here in this root app component, we don't just get the page component that should be loaded, but also the props for that page. So the props determined by get static props or get server-side props. And at least for our profile page, these props will contain a session key with the session we validated inside of get server-side props. So we are setting this session prop on this profile page, and we are setting it to this session which we already loaded and validated with that server-side code. That means that not all our pages, but some pages, in this case the profile page, will have a session prop with session data. So we can set the session for this provider component equal to pageprops.session. In most cases, this will be undefined, because most pages don't have this prop. But our profile page, for example, does have it. And then the session is already set to this already loaded session. And that then allows NextAuth to skip the extra session check performed by use session if we already have the session from our get server-side props function. Now, if we loaded another component, where this is not set, session is undefined, and use session will still do its thing and check it manually. But in cases where we already know that there is a session, we can save some performance and avoid some redundant HTTP requests. And that's never a bad thing, simply by wrapping our application with this extra provider component and utilizing the information which we already have. Now here in my case, I actually still see this extra session request being made here thereafter. NextAuth will have its reasons. Nonetheless, using this provider wrapper is a recommended pattern because it theoretically or practically allows NextAuth to optimize itself internally and skip certain checks and possibly HTTP requests Even though we unfortunately don't see that here, nonetheless, adding this extra wrapper is a recommended optimization, which I therefore of course also wanted to show to you.